Success, it has been said, is not the absence of failure, but going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. My name is BJ Garmillion, and I am the host of the Rush to Fail podcast. This podcast was created to highlight and learn from others who have turned their failures into success in hopes that it will both inspire and encourage others to push through their trials and to not be afraid of short-term failure. Our mantra on this show is to fail often, fail forward, and rush to fail. Welcome to the Rush to Fail podcast. I'm your host, BJ Garmillion, and today I have my good friend Jason Lewis with us today. So his name needs no introduction if you're in the real estate world. If you do anything related to wholesaling, fix and flipping, anything in that realm, everyone is very familiar with this guy. And I'm super fortunate to have him on. This is, I was telling him before the show, this is like number 2 or 3 for him with my different iterations of podcasts that he's been so gracious to come on again for us. And I'm excited. We had some trouble with the internet, but anyways, Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be back. Thanks for the invite always.
You bet. So I am, this is one of those things where I don't really want to talk at all. I love to listen to Jason. In fact, we just got back from Collective Genius. And when I found out that he was speaking in one of the rooms, I quickly got up from the room that I was in, ran over, and was able to catch the majority of his amazing presentation. And so anytime I get to listen to him, I learn so much. And so we're going to start just giving, I guess, the audience a quick background into who you are, personal, those kind of things before you get into the business stuff. Maybe just fill us in on your family and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So Jason Lewis, real estate investor from the Salt Lake City area. I am like you, lots of kids. We did 5 kids in 5 years, then took a 6-year break. And now we have number 6 on the way, due in August.
Yeah. Good for you.
Love where I live. Amazing family. They're my whole reason for all of it. A member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, served a mission, had a huge impact on a lot of the things that I do. I have an awesome team in Utah. We do 150 deals a year, and then spend most of my day-to-day in Investor Machine, which is a company that does high-level lists and marketing, especially through direct mail for real estate investors throughout America.
Awesome. Yeah, when Jason told me that you guys were expecting, or your wife was expecting, my jaw dropped because I could not fathom the idea of having another child right now. I think we're just not in that place. You know what I mean? Like you finally get to a point where you're like, okay, like I forgot how crazy life was. And then, your wife starts thinking about maybe having another one. How was that like for you guys? Like, how did that come about? I'm curious.
Okay. So question for you first. How religious do you want this podcast?
Oh, you know what? Anything goes. In fact, I love that. Yeah, people can share honestly, whatever. Here's the thing that's funny to answer your question, I guess, in a better way. So since moving to the South, I have appreciated more than anything else the fact that everyone is so incredibly open about
yes.
God. And it's just part of their daily conversation. It's not weird. It's just who they are. So if that's who you are, then you do you, and that's what I love.
It is who I am. And I agree. I've done a couple of house builds with who do the storage sheds, and, it's a very big Christian community. And every time I'm there, just the degree of openness about God and religion and everything else is overwhelming and is really, really impressive in a way I want to be more of. Yep. But again, where this is your time, I wanted to ask permission before doing it. So for us, it was entirely spiritual. So the timing of all 5 of our kids, and I guess all 6 of our kids, had everything to do with promptings. So I believe that, God doesn't guide every single decision of our lives, right? He's not saying, hey, buy this can of beans or buy that can of beans or things like that. But there are times and places, if you're willing to listen, that he's willing to speak to you. So, and for us, there's a couple of things that God has always had to say with us in, and I've always felt clear direction from him. Who I married, when I had children, where I worked, and where I lived have all been very guided decisions. There's been a lot of micro guided decisions along the way too, but those are major decisions along the way. And so one of the challenges of striving to live a guided life is God is going to do what is best for you and his eternal plan, and not always exactly what you would choose. You're giving up a degree of free will along the way with this. So my wife and I were married. A couple months later, not a couple months, I would say 9 months to a year later. And by the way, this story goes the same way every time. She starts feeling the promptings first. I'm typically a little bit resistant, and then wind up feeling the same, having the same experience along the way. So she said, hey, we need to have, it's time. I'm feeling promptings really strong. We need to have a kid. I prayed about it, got the same answer. We did it. A year later, so the first two are 2 years apart, same feelings. Then very shortly after number two, same feelings. So there's a year between the two of them. And then what was wild is she said, then we had, I think, a year, and she had the feeling of, we're missing two. And I was like, you can't do this to me. Like, I've got 3 and 3 years. We were rocked when we had 3 and 3 years. I'm not some magical superhuman that can handle kids better than other people. Like, it's still really hard. It's significantly harder at home than anything I've done in the real estate world. So then she said 2 more. And I was like, you cannot drop 2 more on me. Like, baby steps. Went to the Lord, same answer. And the wild part is we had twins. And she has no twins on her side. And I have no natural twins on my side. Like, twins is not like a biologically common thing at all. Wow. So fast forward then 4 or 5 years ago. So we're going to get into the theme of your podcast a little bit of failures. So it was probably a year and a half ago. She came to me and said, hey, we're missing a girl. We're missing a baby girl. And I was like, no, we're not. We did 5. This was the plan. We did 5 in 5 years. We were going to knock them out early. We were going to be empty nesters young. We're going to be able to travel the world. We're going to have time, money, freedom, like all. And we're finally in the good phase. Like, it sucked for a long time, but now my kids are between 6 and 11, and it's amazing. They all get on the same bus to go to school. They're all friends. They get along well together, and it's finally like starting to get easy and great. Like, we're finally getting the payback from the investment, and it's like start over. I was like, nah, not doing that. Not interested. So I closed my heart and was like, I'm not going to pray about it. I'm not like, no, you're receiving bad. And she didn't want to either. Like, the thing to be clear on is she had no desire to either. She's just a better person than me. So, and she, when I would say like, no, not interested, she was super supportive and dropped it. And then like 3 or 4 months would go by and she'd be like, it's coming on really strong again. I'd be like, not interested, not interested. Then finally we made it over a year of this. And finally I was like, all right, I'll at least try. And immediately strongest, clearest prompting, knew it was what we needed to do. And surprise, surprise, a couple months later, found out it was a girl. But I will say, like, choosing to, like, I got to learn a little bit of the like Jonah and the whale avoiding Nineveh story. Me running from that for a year, I can tie back to legitimate things in my life that went more poorly because of that. Like, the heavens kind of closed a little bit. And God was like, if you're not going to listen to me, if you're not even going to ask on the main thing that I want you to do, then we're not even going to talk about anything else that you could do or in your life. And that's putting it a little bit too extreme, but you know, feeling the difference of before that, after that, in my life, in my spirituality and everything else was a good reminder. Like, God just knows and what's best for you. If you've never heard his voice, learn how to hear it. If you do know how to hear it, listen to it.
Man, see what I mean, guys? Like, Jason's just a good dude. And to your point, your wife is incredible. And that's typically how it goes is, they're just better than us in many ways, if not always. But
you've met her, right? On the houseboat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I can definitely attest to it. Yeah. Sorry, bud. But I think that's a compliment to you, though, that you found such an amazing partner to have life with. And so that really is incredible, though, you guys, because Jason and I are in a very similar situation. We go to the same church. We have 5 kids. We had twins at the end. And yeah, that goes to show just how, because again, I cannot fathom, because I feel like we're just slowly getting out of that crazy phase, with twins, and they're 4 now.
It was nuts.
I think 5 is
for
the
a
magic
while.
number. But yeah, you had them all close together, which is just, I don't even want to think about it, honestly. But good for you guys. If anyone can do it, obviously it's the Lewis family, but man, nice work. So that's a cool story. Okay, take us into real estate. So how did you get to the point where you are now? I know that there was a journey to get there, but like, let's just say after college, what was like your first job? How did you find real estate? And then what?
So yeah, I want to make sure we use the time that we've got. Tell me what's the main, because I can take one story and make it the rest of the time we've got. I can hit a couple of different stories along the way. What's the main takeaway you want to make sure we get for your audience?
I think stay high level just so that we know your path, where you got to where you are, and then let's dive into some stories.
Okay, sounds good. So got back from my mission in 2008, right at the bottom of the everything market. Security was the name of the game. I was raised super middle class, and the idea of entrepreneurship, investing, anything like that was way too risky. The world was get a job, do something safe. So got a degree in radiation therapy, hated it, got a part-time job in it, hated it. And again, coming back to that supportive wife, decided that after spending all the time to do that, wanted to go and do something else, which was work for the only real estate investor I could find for free until I was worth something. We had just barely had the first. So by the way, speaking of, following God's promptings, even when you have to go forward in faith, we got pregnant with Joseph when we were both still in school. And when she had him, all the money that we were making was me waiting tables at a Mexican restaurant at night. So with me waiting tables at a restaurant at night, I made the choice, hey, I want to go into real estate investing. Nobody was hiring, nobody was paying. So I went and worked for somebody for free until I was worth something, which turned out to be a month. And then from there, started getting paid. We were flipping a home a month, maybe. We scaled that from a home a month and me being the guy getting lunch and just doing whatever I could to be useful without any real structure or anything else to the COO of the company. And we were doing 150 plus homes a year, had a rental portfolio at least that big commercial deals, big operation. That was 5 years. Then at that point, left. And again, talking about timing and faith and everything else, I left we're emphasizing a little more on the family side, which I don't as much on this one. So left that September 2017, and kids 4 and 5 in 5 years were born in November of 2017. So, and I'll pull out a lesson that I probably have never really pulled out before. And that is, I'm at where I'm at today because I lived like a pauper when I was young and had an emergency savings. My parents did fine. We were middle class. My dad was a computer programmer. My mom stayed home. They didn't pay for my school. They didn't pay for my cars. I drove the minivan, had a seatbelt that would like make noise and move back and forth along the way. I couldn't pick up girls to save my life, but they were super frugal. My dad still is today. And they kind of passed that along to me. So, I started reffing soccer when I was 12. I was flipping burgers when I was 16. I was landscaping when I was 18. After my mission, I was smart enough to get a scholarship. After my mission, I was waiting tables while going to school and then working really hard all through the summer. So, I graduated school and my wife had done okay at saving too. I think we had like 15, 20 grand in savings. That's the only reason why I had the option to have a brand new baby and go work for somebody else for free, because I wasn't paycheck to paycheck at that point. That said, I was driving a car that was worth $2,000. My wife and I at that point were hand washing our Ziploc bags so that we could reuse our Ziploc bags so that we didn't have to go get more Ziploc bags. We were living in a tiny basement apartment, even though even though we had a net worth of 20 grand, I was driving a piece of crap. I was living in a tiny place, and we were living as frugally as we could because money equals optionality. Same thing. Fast forward the 5 years, I started making pretty good money, but I continued to live as far below my means as possible. And that's why for me, it wasn't that risky to leave a stable job and start my entrepreneurial journey 3 months before having kids 4 and 5 in 5 years, because I knew I had plenty of savings, that I had room to be wrong, and I could go trust my skill set. So that's a lesson I've never shared on a podcast before.
That's amazing.
But is pretty important. And again, I'm definitely advantaged, right? Like, I am a white male, grew up with, a mom that stayed home, great parents and everything else. But I'm not like, Trump, whose dad funded his first business, $100 million or everything else. I'm just like an average dude that didn't have like a massive leg up, but also wasn't necessarily being massively pulled down. But regardless, living on less than your means and having a savings provides optionality to be able to get ahead.
Man, such a great point. Yeah. And I mean, I just can't imagine being in that situation where I have Jason Lewis walk into my office and say, look, I want to work for you for free. And you don't have to pay me anything until I can prove my worth. Like, I just don't know if that would ever happen, let alone in 2008, maybe obviously it would. That was a different, the economy was obviously in the tank. And so maybe that would have been more common, but I just can't fathom that now. With how hard it is to find talent and hire, that someone would have that, mentality coming into your office.
So something kind of important to share. I wasn't Jason Lewis back then. Like,
right.
I was like, the guy now is not the guy that started working for Kenny. I didn't know most of what I know. I have adjusted, adapt, and grown and become into who I am now, largely because of the opportunities that I had while I was there, plus the constant refiner's fire of entrepreneurship, growth, getting 1% better in every day and everywhere. And I still have plenty of ways to grow and improve and things that I could go and do better. But the thing to keep in mind is he didn't have a Jason Lewis come walk in there. He had whatever I was then and believed in me and saw the potential enough to help me refine and grow and become who I was when I left him, which helped me to grow and become into who and what I am now.
Yeah. And honestly, that's what I mean, though. I mean, even if I found someone, because I always, tell people, I don't care about your experiences. And in fact, I prefer if you don't have real estate experience if you want to be like, for example, an acquisition rep, because I feel like those are things that you can learn. What you cannot teach is those intangibles. And that's what you did have coming in there was like, look, I know how to work. I got a good head on my shoulders. Like, I'm hungry. I want to do whatever it takes. I've got the IQ, I've got the EQ, I've got self-awareness, like all those intangibles. You came in and I mean, good for him though, for realizing what he had, I guess in front of him. Was he the first person that you approached, or was he like, number 5, 10, whatever down the road? Like, was he? I'm just curious.
He was the first and only, but I approached him. He told me no. I approached him a second time. He told me no. I approached him a third time. He told me no. It was the fourth time that I approached him within a 2-week span and said, I'm just showing up tomorrow and I'm going to be useful. And if I ever prove that I'm worth something, you can pay me that he said yes.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not like I didn't come in initially with the I'm going to work for free sales pitch. I came in initially with a you should hire me 3 different times pitch. And then the fourth one was the I'm just going to show up.
That's incredible. And it's funny because the employee that we've had for the longest, and I don't even consider her like an employee. She's more or less like a partner of mine is my assistant, Lori, who is just phenomenal. Can't do life without her. Lori from working together. But it's funny.
Didn't I try to hire her away from you at one point?
You did.
Jokingly?
And I
Yes.
I think that was the greatest, compliment, for her as well. But it's funny because she actually came in for the sales role, right? Like that's how she found us. Is she was like, she wanted to get away from a real estate team that she was on. And so, we did like a ride along together, and we did, a couple appointments, and it was quickly, I was like, I don't know if you'd be right for sales necessarily, but she was like you, where she followed up, I think 3 or 4 times after, applying, which never happens these days. And then, she more or less was just like, hey, like, I really want this position. We met together, very professional. And I was like, I don't know where you're going to fit. I really don't, like it's not going to be in the sales role. But you're going to fit somewhere. We're going to figure this out together. And sure enough, she sat in just about every seat but that and does great at all of them. But, we finally found that sweet spot. And again, it was just the fact that she was just she impressed me just with all the intangibles. And so those don't come around very often. So everyone listening, like if you get a Jason Lewis walking the door like that, like grab on, take advantage of that, because that doesn't happen. He's probably never had that happen to him again, I imagine, or someone walked in willing to work for free. That's just such a cool.
The CG presentation that you walked in on was how to keep that person too. Like when you find that perfect implementer type person, these are the things that they're going to want from your side as the idea guy or girl, company owner, visionary type person.
Yeah. And let's get into that, because I think that, one of the frustrations a lot of business owners have, this is for sure one that I've had and that I've kind of wrestled with, is it seems like everyone is just renting the job, right? They're like, okay, I'm going to be here for a year or two. I'm going to take what I can from it. And then I'm going to go find someone else that, might pay more or whatever. Maybe the grass is greener over here. And so they're just there for a year or two. And everyone seems to be frustrated, both on their side as well as the owner's side. So yeah, like how are you able to, have that culture in place where people are not even looking, and they want to be there?
It's a great question. So I'm not perfect. I've had turnover. I would say it's probably, especially in the Utah company, significantly below average turnover. So the answers that I give here are the answers that are like good and right for me. They're not necessarily universal. In the end, as a company owner, as an entrepreneur, you have to do what is authentic to you. So don't just go do exactly what I do, but here's some things that I think I do well. I think people really, so talking results. I mean, I have a like outbound / lead manager that's been with me for 6 years. She does it's the exact same conversation all day, over and over and over again. She's got basically the same role that she had 6 years ago, and she's still with me today, still loves it, still crushing it, absolutely love her. So number one, for me, the virtual culture and the massive freedom, I think, goes a long way for people. It's a form of compensation that really, really goes far. People love freedom. And when you get the right people that can handle it and that do well with it, they don't want to give it up. 2, having a really good company culture matters. We just got to hear from CG, from Cameron Harold, about culture. He's a master company culture person. He had people picketing in front of his 1-800-GOT-JUNK saying, please hire me. I asked him I got to go to lunch with him after, because the people that won the belts got to go to lunch with him after. And one of the questions I asked him is like, how did you, like, culture-wise, how did you go build the culture that you built? And his answer was, it wasn't like, amazing, but I think it's the truth. And I just really, really, and not only did I care about the end result, but I really cared about the people and the people on the team and their life and their goals and everything else. And I built a good enough system. And so I would call myself above average at the first one and then below average at the second one. So the first one is caring. Like, I really, really care. The second one is I created a system where, for lack of better terms, I had time to care. I wasn't so tied down in the minutia and the day-to-day and meetings and everything else that, though I cared, I didn't have an opportunity to show it or to build a culture around that care. So he didn't get tied down in the minutia, and he would go randomly walk. I mean, he's got 1,000 employees in a building. He'd go randomly walk through and talk to and really get to know people, understand what their goals are, and help them, go and do and become what those goals are. So, find out what people want and align what they're doing in the day-to-day to what they ultimately want, and make it a good day-to-day to work in, and people will stick around for a long time.
Such a good point. Yeah. And I guess I have 2 questions to that. First, who's a business owner in Utah that spoke as well about culture?
Matt Oviatt.
Matt. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to give him credit. He gave a phenomenal presentation, and it wasn't anything like, groundbreaking. He didn't share anything that I guess I didn't know. He just does a phenomenal job at helping his employees understand their worth, and showing his appreciation for what they do on a daily basis. And then not only that, but then also focusing on helping out others, so that they make the connection. He helps them make the connection. He's like, yes, I could go out as a business owner and, I've got money to spare so I could go give it to charity. But instead of doing that, he takes it one step further and makes sure to involve his team always in going out and then sharing, with others and finding service opportunities. And that's just something that I feel is such a simple thing to do, but I don't think anyone does it. Like it's maybe 1%,
I'm a big believer too,
see?
and I do the same thing. So we take a little bit of a different approach every quarter based off of the number of transactions that people do, we're a part of, et cetera. There's a couple things we do. Number one, I serve my mission in Africa. I'm still tied and connected to Africa. And I have a convert who is a bishop now, I just was talking to him on Saturday. He's been a bishop for 7 years, still working on training his replacement. But as soon as he gets somebody trained up, the stake takes him, which is the next level up in leadership. So he's been in there for a long, long time. But in Zimbabwe, they have a good public education infrastructure. They've got teachers, they've got buildings, they've got all of this stuff. But it costs like $300 a year for a kid to go to school for the year. That includes books, tuition, food, everything. It's basically $300 for them to go to school. And a lot of parents just can't come up with the $300. So you got all these kids that would love to go to school, but can't because their parents can't come up with the money. So we have a tie-in where every single deal we do, we fund one of those kids in Zimbabwe. And that kid sends us a before video saying, hey, I'm so-and-so. This is what I want to be when I grow up. Would super appreciate it if you could help me out at school. And then an after video of them in their uniform saying, thank you so much for funding my school. So every deal is connected to, good that we were able to do someone in Zimbabwe. Because in Zimbabwe, you don't graduate. Like it's not the same land of opportunity here. You're going to be in that same poverty cycle, completely unable to provide for your family. Then the second thing that I do is I give everybody money, and every quarter we do our charitable meeting where basically anyone in the company has the opportunity to bring any charitable cause they want. And it doesn't have to be like a 501c3, like Wounded Warrior or something. Oftentimes it's our virtual assistants overseas, like, hey, I'm in Costa Rica and this area just had a massive flood. A bunch of the houses got destroyed and there's 200 kids sleeping on the floor. We can pick up mattresses here for $5. We bought like 400 mattresses and then he took pictures of all these mattresses being distributed across everyone in Nicaragua. We every year for Christmas help random bikers that like bike around with people behind them that barely make enough to pay the bills. We give them a Christmas thing. We've helped orphanages. And the funny part is, so the team organizes it wherever they are. We do US based ones too. It could be paying for helping someone with cancer or someone, that knows someone that's going through a hard time. I actually try to not do like the big charities, but like hey, I know someone that's not going to get help otherwise that really makes a difference. And then I give everyone in the company money to contribute to any of their things or whatever their own thing that it is. So it changes it from I work for a philanthropic company to I'm philanthropic. And it's a very different feeling, the one versus the other.
Yeah. So if anyone has a question on like, well, we work remote or, we have people overseas. So how do we get our company culture, when we are not in the same room or same office? And there you go. Like that's a perfect example of how no matter where you are in the world, this can bring us all and unite us all together because we all want to help others out. And, that's our culture and that's how it bleeds through to everyone on the team, which such a cool, man, I love that. There's so many things that I learned. It's those little things that I pick up on when I go to these events and I'm like, okay, I need to be better. Like I want to take that one thing or those two things and just, implement that next quarter. Okay. Help me understand, because I know that I think sometimes people think that business is linear and they see the person where they're at right now. They're like, oh my gosh, he's just had everything afforded to him and he got there because he's just smarter than I am or whatever the case may be, or he had more opportunity than I did. But we all know that there's like a roller coaster and it's crazy, right? Like we know that the truth behind the success, it's not always pretty. So I'm curious, what are some of the big fall on your face moments, that you've had as you've, gone from different career to different career? And what are some lessons that you took away?
So I'll pick probably my biggest, most recent, hardest thing that I had to overcome that has been overcome that is now just wildly exciting. So 4 years ago, Mike Hambright and I started Investor Machine. Basically, company that builds lists. We take and basically it's a really, really, really deep version of stacking. So not only are we getting all motivation points you can buy online, we're also paying a virtual assistant to go to the county and pulling out individual motivation points, all of the hard ones, water shutoffs, code violations, probates, getting the high level stuff. And then we take and score it against a property. So we give a property score, this zip code gets 5 points. This zip code gets 1 point. This year built gets 5, 1, everywhere in between. And basically what the end result is, we score the county from this is the first person you'd want to market to this is the last person you'd want to market to. So company grew really big, really quick, tens of millions of dollars a year, tons of money and people coming through. But when the market shifted, things started to get a little bit tough for some. So we had, and this is honestly one of the biggest challenges I've been through, we had this mixed bag of certain people, and you mentioned some of their names earlier. We'll use two names that you mentioned that are actually pretty similar for this case. So we have Jimmy Vreeland, Mark Dillator. One's in St. Louis, the other's in Kansas City. Both really good friends of mine. Jimmy's been with Investor Machine for 4 or 5 years and has had amazing results every quarter from day one. Mark and his COO, Chris, worked with me and we could not make it work in Kansas City. Two similar markets, and they weren't the only ones that we couldn't make it work in Kansas City. And this problem racked my soul. One of my main core values is excellence. Anything that I do, I want to do at a high level. And we had this mix through the downtime of markets and people we're crushing it with, and markets and people that it just isn't working. And, there's, in some instances, it's, you didn't answer the phone. If you answer the phone, the marketing works. Ding, solve your problem. But in some instances, it's I see how many leads got generated and I see the market that we spent and it's not working and I don't know why. And it was one of the biggest lows for me because I love answering problems and coming up with solutions. And, to have my friends come to me and say, hey, Jason, I trusted you with this money and I spent this marketing money with you and it didn't work, was ultimate stab in the gut. So I racked my brain on this for years before finally, and it's gonna sound simple, but it's much more complex than this. Where I ultimately went wrong was I applied a formula that works amazing in Salt Lake, in my market, across all markets in America. An absentee is worth 1 point. An out-of-state absentee is worth 2 points. Probate's worth 4 points. A divorce is worth 3 points. So on and so forth. And this is roughly how we'd score zip codes. Smaller houses are better. Older houses are better. So on and so forth. So in some places, that formula was just right. But every different market, every different MSA is wildly different. So what we went and did, and I had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and years and millions of dollars in marketing money and everything else to really, really figure this out. We went through and figured out, okay, in this market, who sold to an investor? What do they look like? What's their motivations? So on and so forth. And the thing that I found is that in some markets, some of my assumptions were just dead wrong. I had spent 6 figures buying basically it's like a predictive list around low credit. So it's not like Experian credit data, but it's like a predictive list around low credit. I spent a bunch of money on this because it's hey, someone has bad credit, they're more likely to sell to an investor. Reasonable guess, right? Some markets true, a lot of markets. Not only was it that it didn't help, but it was counterproductive. If I would have just gone into Property Radar, List Source, or PropStream and clicked randomize, let's say I've got a 1% chance of someone selling to an investor. If I literally just click random and any single family home comes back, I've got a 1% chance. That list that I spent all that money on had a 0.5% chance. So I spent all that money on that list. Again, just talking that one list, we were bringing in, 30 different lists and plugging them in, but just taking that one list in, which was a pretty big list, it was actually halving someone's likelihood of selling, which was counteracting other parts of my list that were, so let's say you have a market where probates are great. This low credit list is bad. Probates bring it up. Low credit's bad. There's more low credit lists. It negates all of the benefit of it. Same thing with size. Same thing with years on. I just learned all of the different areas where I made some assumptions based off of my gut, and I was wrong. So the cool part is we went through and implemented, and now we build those boxes based off of this report of who sold to investors in the area. And in the areas where that low credit list doesn't work well, we pull it. There's some markets where eviction is one of the best lists out there. And there's other lists where, for whatever reason, if they evicted a tenant, they're less likely to sell to an investor than if they're just an absentee. Doesn't make sense to me, but it doesn't have to make sense to me. And overwhelmingly, those markets, including Kansas City, where it didn't work great for Mark De La Torre, we've had people that it's gone well for. Atlanta was a market where it didn't go well. Now it's going really well. We've had, we had somebody in LA get 6 contracts in their first 2 months. LA used to eat me for lunch as a service provider. Like those type of markets were very, very difficult. So it was years of misery and struggle and wanting to quit because I hated disappointing my friends. But I didn't, because I also didn't want to disappoint the people who were coming to me saying, hey, Jason, the only reason I survived the correction was because of Investor Machine. You guys saved my business. Plus, we have 75 people that work for us in Investor Machine. It's not a small company. Like, we've got a lot going on. I didn't want to disappoint those people. So I just persevered through. And now on the backside, it's like, oh, we did it. But it took years of twisting, tweaking, turning, trying this, trying that, figuring this out to finally get, this is it. So, and a more concise formula that works for every single market at a really high level. And now to be hearing the consistent, oh my gosh, this is amazing, is awesome. That's not to say we magically snap overnight became perfect, but the difference is remarkable. So there's your most recent and most profound rags to riches story for me.
Man, and see what's so incredible, like you are probably the poster child for the rush to fail concept, where it's just like, hey, let's get through as many iterations of like what doesn't work, what we can tweak and fix and change. You're doing that on a nationwide basis, all at the same time, learning rapidly, and so now you're getting to that point where, to what you just said, is like, they're not failures. I know that the word failure can come across harshly as if it's a bad thing. It's just like learning opportunities that you're like, okay, that didn't work. Why? Ask the question enough times, and then you find the solution to where you're at now. So I'm actually curious, because I mean, like you are collecting an incredible amount of data right now, like nationwide. You get to use other people's money, see how that works, see how it plays.
Well, and to be clear, and my own money. The first iteration of Investor Machine came because of years of doing my own lists and direct mail and everything else, and failing and iterating and making mistakes. And almost any time before I roll anything out to the Investor Machine group, I fail and iterate on it on myself, figure out that it's great, then share it with the group. And now, but the thing I didn't take fully into account is just how different every single market is. Now we can take that into account too.
Man, that's incredible. Yeah. And so what is, I guess, next for you? Because I mean, so you've got a company creation, or what's the Utah company called again?
Yep. Creation Utah.
Okay. Creation Utah. So you've got that company pretty much more or less working on autopilot, because you've got great people and systems in place. And so that's taking care of itself. You've got, Investor Machine that is continually growing like crazy and serving and helping others that are, trying to find off market properties. And so is there, I guess, another is there another step like in your progression? Or are you just going deeper into Investor Machine, or are there other opportunities that you're looking at right now?
Great question. So I just 2 months ago hired an awesome high-level COO for Investor Machine. who's
Oh, cool.
2 months in and doing great. So my near-term future is replacing myself as COO on that company and then moving into, with my president, CEO, more owner's box type of thing. So he's running the day-to-day. I'm full focused on where I get my kicks is on rolling out the next thing. I love taking something and making it better. I love working on. I hate working in the business. And I have worked in the business for a long time and not liked. It's interesting because I've been financially well off, but have still had a job that have not liked at all for years, trying to get to the point of what I ultimately want. And I'm really close. I think by this summer I'm there. Now I have 2 companies, both with things that can be worked on. Go to Collective Genius, pick up some ideas, go see them through with my team, run them through, but then send them off. Don't keep running them. Don't have to maintain the day-to-day and everything else. Now go do the next one. Now go do the next one. Now go do the next one. I see myself in that phase for a long time of A, not working the insane hours that I have the last little bit, and B, iterate. Just, okay, here's our roadmap. Here's our rocks. This is everything we're going to go do. Me go do my part for each of those things along the way. Now we're going to spin up getting deals through realtors over here. Now we're going to spin up, mailing everybody that's been to your website and having that sync with your follow-ups, and having then a tool that tells you exactly what to spend on budget in Investor Machine. So now you've got the exact lists, the exact creative, the exact everything based off of data. Now I know based off of data exactly what I should spend in budget. And as fast as I roll them out, Mike and I in Investor Machine and me in the Utah company will continue to come up with cool new things to do. That's kind of where my life goes from here.
Jason is the mad scientist. And so anytime I get to be around him, I just feel smarter after our conversation. So this is no different. And I appreciate you coming on. I know you have a hard stop coming up. One last question for you, Jason, before I let you go. If you were able to, and this is what I ask, everyone on the show is, if you were able to go back, to that younger self that showed up that you mentioned was not Jason Lewis, or the Jason Lewis that you are today, what's a bit of advice that you would give yourself that would probably help you to kind of expedite your success? Not that you needed expediting, I guess, but you've been pretty successful as it is. But what is a lesson that maybe you would teach your younger self?
Yeah. So the advice I would give is kind of almost a little bit opposite that. And that is stress less. It all was going to work out. And I still have to consistently give myself this advice. Like, I'm ADD, I'm prone to anxiety, and just stress less. It all works out. Like, you profess faith in God, go actually have faith in God, believe in him that it's all going to work out. And all along the way, there's going to be scary stuff that's happening. Being an entrepreneur is incredibly difficult, challenging, draining, taxes you in every human way. In the end, ultimately, it all works out. Whether the business succeeds or fails, it all ultimately works out. Life is happening for you, not just to you, and quit stressing out with all of the little things along the way. That would be my main advice.
Such a great piece of advice. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yep. Happy to be back. Always a pleasure.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to this podcast. It's the best part of my week. I love learning from others' failures, and let's be honest, failures are way more enjoyable when you're not the one experiencing them in the moment. If you or someone you know has a story or experience to share, we would love to have you on the show. And please do not forget to like and share this podcast with anyone you feel would get value from the experiences shared on this show. Until the next show, remember to fail fast and fail often. Thanks for listening to the Rush to Fail podcast.